Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a strange kind of stillness, a quiet space behind every decision you've ever made. Imagine this: you're sitting at a crossroads, not just of streets, but of thought itself. The wind hums low outside, and your room glows faintly like a stage before a show. You're alone, but not really, because every choice you make echoes someone else's breath, heartbeat, hesitation. This is a story not just of games, but of the invisible rules that bind us all. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The game begins before you even realize you're playing, not with dice, not with rules written in a book, but in a glance, a silence, a door left just slightly open. You walk into a room and notice how someone's shoulders tense. Do you speak? Smile? Wait? Already, you're in it, the invisible arena of decision. This isn't poker. This isn't chess. This is every moment where your outcome depends on someone else's response, and theirs depends on yours. Game theory whispers, there are rules, but they're not handed to you. They're inferred like the shape of wind or the edge of a shadow. You feel them, almost like muscle memory you never earned. You think you chose that seat on the train because it was empty, but maybe it's because it wasn't too close to someone, or because someone looked up just as you passed. And just like that, your logic is shared, distributed, a strange dance between minds. What guides these choices? Somewhere in the folds of consciousness, a pattern unfolds, not because you're calculating, but because we're wired to anticipate, to simulate, to predict how others will act, and then bend ourselves into a shape that fits the echo of their prediction. Take a moment to absorb this. Every choice you've made today was a reply to a move that might never have been played. And the more you think you're acting freely, the deeper you're submerged in the game. You don't need to understand all the rules. You just need to know they exist, and more unsettling, that they might be shaping you more than you shape them. Think of a baby crying and a mother rushing to comfort. Neither has read a strategy manual, but somehow they know the game. The payoff is love. The risk is abandonment. The move is a cry, a touch, a hush. No words needed. Even animals play, not with tokens or contracts, but with eyes, posture, ritual. Game theory didn't begin in a lab. It's older than war, older than money. It began when two creatures stared at each other across a shared need, and something inside said, "Wait, what will they do?" And so began a ripple. The ripple became logic. Logic became models. And now economists, psychologists, AI engineers all try to bottle that ripple, give it names: utility, payoff, strategy, equilibrium. But beneath the math, it's still just two minds peering at one another through the fog. You, listening now, might be in bed, eyes closed, breath slowing, and yet somewhere deep in you, you're still anticipating, still reacting to others' imagined moves. Even in solitude, you're never not playing, because to be human is to live among possibilities, not all of them real, just real enough to shape your next breath. Let that thought linger for a while. What if everything you've ever called a decision was actually a response, not to a rule book you saw, but to one you sensed? And what if the person across from you felt the same? Two ghosts, each reacting to the other's imagined footsteps. That's the opening of game theory. Not a game, but the ghost of one, a haunted geometry of intentions, a maze with no center, no edge, just the shimmer of mutual consideration. Sleep begins here, in the pause between thoughts, and this is just the first move. You are not alone in the game, even in the quiet moments, especially in the quiet moments. The game persists, a chessboard in your mind, not with knights and bishops, but with possibilities. Every person you've ever met is still in there, moving. A word they said 5 years ago, a look they gave you last week, even the stranger who didn't hold the elevator. They're all still pieces in play. And the rules, they aren't rules in the traditional sense, not commands, not boundaries, but expectations, assumptions. You wake up and check your messages, not because you need to, but because someone might be waiting. You hold back a thought in conversation, not because it's untrue, but because of how it might land. You smile when you're tired, nod when you're unsure. You play 1,000 micro games a day, and none of them were written for you. And take a deep breath here. Notice how you calculate, even when you don't mean to. When you walk into a cafe and glance around, who's looking? Where should you sit? Will you order something too expensive? Too cheap? It's not paranoia. It's not insecurity. It's game theory, etched into your instincts. You're not paranoid to care what others might do. You're wired to. It's survival by second guessing. If you lived in a world with no one else, no minds to meet, no eyes to mirror, you wouldn't need strategy. You wouldn't need restraint. You wouldn't need language or trust or fear. But that's not your world. In your world, you are surrounded by minds that model you as you model them. A feedback loop so infinite, so recursive, it becomes indistinguishable from thought itself. Do you ever wonder how deeply you've been shaped by people you barely remember? The teacher who paused before answering your question, the friend who ghosted you when you needed them, the stranger who waved at you like an old friend and kept walking. Each of them taught you new rules, not rules you wrote down, but rules that live in your spine now. Rules about when to speak, when to withdraw, when to push forward, and when to fold. Imagine you're walking through a forest. Every tree is another person's expectation. Some are rooted deep, childhood rules that never left you. Others are fresh saplings, last week's awkward silence, still growing. And you move carefully. You calculate where to step. You avoid making too much noise, not because the forest is dangerous, but because it might watch you. That's the paradox of the social game. To be free, you must first understand that you're not. You are a player in a vast, silent economy of choices, where your smile might buy goodwill, your silence might cost trust, and your timing might change everything. Even now, just lying there, wrapped in warmth and softness, you're not truly alone, because your mind is still simulating other minds, still preparing for the next move, the next word, the next need from someone else. This isn't a curse. It's not manipulation. It's existence. To live among others is to always be partially outside yourself, to lend a corner of your consciousness to the unpredictable tides of them. It's why we form habits, why we cling to rituals, why we crave consistency, not because we love routine, but because we're exhausted from predicting everyone else's games. Sometimes strategy is a sanctuary. Sometimes your morning coffee isn't about caffeine. It's about one small piece of the board that stays the same. Take another breath. Sink into that idea. That maybe strategy isn't always cold calculation. Maybe it's comfort. Maybe it's how we keep from drowning in the unpredictable. You are not alone in the game, but you don't have to play it all at once. There are places, soft places, quiet moments, where the simulation fades, like now, like here, no decisions to make, no moves to counter. Just you, drifting slowly through a shared dream of invisible games. And tonight, the game will wait. It always does. Picture a four-way stop in the dead of night. No lights, no signs, no engines but your own, rumbling softly like a thought not yet formed. You ease up to the crossroads. Another car does too, and then another, and one more. 4 drivers, 4 paths, 4 quiet hearts trying to read one another's minds through nothing but headlights and hesitation. This is not a traffic moment. It is pure game theory. 4 agents, no hierarchy, no script. Only silent calculations and mirrored instincts. Who goes first? Who yields? Who pretends to yield just to test the others? The horns don't blare. No one shouts. But inside every car, a simulation is running. Each person imagining what the others will do. Each move designed not in isolation, but in response to imagined responses. This, you realize, is the essence of interdependence. A moment of stillness shaped entirely by possibility. You may never meet these people again. You may not even glimpse their faces. But for a few seconds, your lives are knotted, intertwined by caution, strategy, and guesswork. Take a breath. Let this sink in. Even the most mundane moments are games played with invisible rules and ghostly reasoning. You may think of strategy as something reserved for generals or grandmasters, but game theory doesn't wait for formal declarations. It whispers in subtle shifts, the hesitation before you speak, the speed of your blink, the shape of your silence. At the 4-way stop, there's no right answer. There's only coordination, a strange ballet of who thinks who will move first. And the moment someone flinches, even slightly, the equilibrium collapses. The others respond. The system resets. The first one crosses, then another, then you, and the moment is gone. But what if it hadn't worked? What if 2 moved at once, or no one moved at all? Game theory has a name for that too, a failure to coordinate, a breakdown in the mutual modeling of minds. You've felt it before, in a conversation where both people start speaking, then stop, then laugh awkwardly, in a handshake that doesn't quite align, in a hug where you're unsure whether to lean in or pull away. Tiny fractures in the shared simulation, and those moments linger, not because of what happened, but because of what they revealed, that the game is delicate, that the illusion of smooth social motion is a miracle of constant calibration. You are a strategist, whether you want to be or not, and every day you step up to 1,000 4-way stops, with friends, with strangers, with the people you love, and somehow it works, mostly. You nod when they nod, you pause when they speak, you laugh just long enough, then return to your own lane. There is something both beautiful and eerie in that. That human connection is built not on perfect understanding, but on mutual anticipation, on the dance of thought shadows. So next time you hesitate before speaking, next time you wonder if you should text first or walk through the door before someone else, know that you are not overthinking. You are playing the oldest game, the game of minds imagining minds. And somewhere, even now, in your half-sleep, your dreams are still dancing at intersections, lightless, wordless, strategic, Now imagine darkness, not absence, but potential. A darkness before stars, before rules, before even the sense that rules could exist. You are in that void, formless, but aware, drifting in a sea of infinite options, no, up or down, only a pulsing stillness that murmurs, choose, and from that whisper, strategy is born, not from wisdom, not from intellect, but from uncertainty. Because when you don't know what will happen, when there is no light, no guarantee, you begin to test, you begin to play. Game theory emerges not to describe chaos, but to survive it. It grows like moss across the unknown. It's easy to think strategy is something clean, a tidy map of optimal moves. But the truth is more haunting. Strategy is born from fear, from not knowing what the other will do, or even who they are. Picture early humans facing predators, strangers, storms, no words yet, just eyes and guesses. Do they fight? Do they run? Do they share? Each move a signal, each reaction a test of what kind of game this moment is. You think of war and business and diplomacy, but game theory began in the caves, by the fire, with hunger, with suspicion, with two people eyeing the same piece of meat. What makes a strategy rise from the noise? It's not just choice, it's expectation. The idea that someone, somewhere, is also calculating, also hesitating, also imagining you. And now you are entangled, not by force, but by foresight. That's where the magic begins. The illusion that you're thinking independently dissolves, and you realize your thoughts are shadows of someone else's imagined thoughts. Even now, lying still, with your eyes closed and your muscles relaxing, your brain is echoing moves it never made, rehearsing outcomes for games you may never play. This is not wasted energy. It is your birthright. To imagine the minds of others is to survive them, to preempt betrayal, to invite alliance, to create an entire mental universe without ever speaking. Strategy, in its purest form, is empathy weaponized, a beautiful terror, a bridge made of glass, and yet somehow the more we use it, the more it binds us. Two minds reaching toward one another through guesses, through glances, through silence. Pause here, feel that deep hum beneath all your choices, that urge to model, predict, protect. It isn't weakness, it isn't overthinking. It's ancient, and it's the reason you're here. Even stars play this game. Binary systems locked in mutual orbits, each pulling on the other's mass, reshaping their paths in eternal silence. And you, your heart, your intentions, your timing, your tone are no different. You adjust because you sense the adjustment in them, and they adjust because of you. A recursive rhythm, a shared hallucination of balance, and from that order emerges, not perfect, not pure, but enough. Enough to keep the stars in motion, enough to keep the fire alive, enough to fall asleep, trusting someone else will stay awake just long enough to watch over you. Strategy is the light we strike against chaos. It is not the fire, but it is the flint. And every moment you hesitate, every moment you pause to wonder what someone else will do, you are striking that flint again. You are playing the most ancient game, the one with no board, no referee, no ending, only moves and the quiet echo of what might happen next. So let that thought settle, not as worry, but as awe. You are a strategist born of stardust, a dreamer mapping the minds of dreamers. And tonight, as your breath slows, the game does not end. It only softens. It folds into the deeper currents of sleep, where even dreams are negotiated. You lie beneath your ceiling now, but in your mind, another ceiling forms, not made of plaster or wood, but of logic, tension, invisible walls of choice. You begin to understand, even when you act with pure intent, when you do what seems best for yourself, the outcome may be worse for everyone involved. And that is the paradox of rational selfishness, a silent tragedy hiding inside every reasonable decision, not because you made a mistake, but because everyone else also acted reasonably. This is the haunting core of the game. Sometimes, when all the players play their best hand, they still lose. You and another player. A locked room. Two options: cooperate or betray. And no matter what you hope they'll do, you don't know. So you protect yourself. You defect. You betray. And so do they. And now, you both lose something neither of you had to, because you couldn't quite bring yourself to trust the silence. Game theorists call this a dominant strategy, the option that gives the best outcome no matter what the other player does. But in this room, that strategy leads to mutual collapse. Take a moment here. Feel how that sits in the body. The idea that the rational choice can still be the wrong one, that logic can lead you to ruin, not because it was flawed, but because it was shared. Imagine two people running for the last seat on the last train. If one runs and the other walks, the runner wins. If both walked, they both board. But if both run, they crash. Miss the door. Miss the train. No one was irrational. No one was cruel. And yet, failure. Because what you expect of others shapes what you do. And what they expect of you shapes them in return. An echo chamber of anticipation. This is the dark poetry of strategic reasoning. It doesn't require malice, only symmetry. And that symmetry can become a trap. You start to see it everywhere. In traffic jams, in bidding wars, in arms races, in conversations that devolve into silence because both people are waiting for the other to speak first. We have all sat across from someone, hoping they would open up, apologize, or simply reach across the void. And we wait, and they wait, and we both assume the other's silence is a strategy, when maybe it's just fear. The game becomes its own ghost, haunting the space between us, and neither side dares to move first. The cost of vulnerability feels too high. The math tells you to guard yourself, and the other does the same. And so, no one moves. Now breathe. Feel how many of your past regrets were born from both sides doing what seemed safe, from both sides trying not to get hurt, from both sides defecting just in case the other might. This isn't a story about weakness. It's a story about the limits of logic, about the quiet collapse that occurs when mutual distrust is the default. And it's why some of the most powerful acts, trust, vulnerability, forgiveness, often seem irrational, because they defy the game. They defy the dominant strategy. They say, I will cooperate, even if I don't know that you will. They are leaps of faith in a framework that discourages leaping. But sometimes, only a leap can end the cycle. Only a risk can reset the equation. Only a moment of irrational grace can dissolve the perfectly rational walls we've built around ourselves. So let this thought cradle you as you drift. Your instincts to protect yourself are not wrong. They are ancient, they are wise, but they are also incomplete. There are games where everyone loses when everyone plays it safe, and there are lives where every safe choice builds another layer between two people who need each other. You are more than your strategy. You are more than your logic. You are capable of bending the game. And sometimes, just sometimes, the only winning move is to not play the way you're supposed to. Imagine you're sitting across from someone in a cold, fluorescent lit room. There are no windows, no clocks, just two chairs, a table, and the question, do you trust them? This is the prisoner's dilemma, a thought experiment dressed as a choice, but it's more than that. It's a mirror, one that reflects not just who you are, but who you think the other person might be. Here's how it unfolds. You're both accused. You can stay silent or betray. If you both stay silent, you both go free. If you both betray, you both suffer. But if one betrays while the other stays silent, the betrayer walks, and the trusting one pays the full price. And so you stare, not at them, but through them. You wonder, are they like me? Do they want to trust? Or are they already calculating how best to betray me? And so you lean toward caution, toward defection, toward betrayal. Because betrayal, paradoxically, is the safe choice. Even if it hurts you both, it protects you from the worst. This is the pain of the dilemma, that trust becomes a liability, that cooperation becomes a gamble, and that in the absence of certainty, fear becomes strategy. Take a deep breath here. Let it settle in you. This room is not imaginary. It's your dinner table after an argument. It's a business deal wrapped in silence. It's a relationship in winter, both of you waiting for the other to speak first, to admit fault, to soften. It's two souls locked in a room made not of walls, but of doubts. Game theory doesn't offer comfort, it offers clarity, and that clarity is often cold. It says, trust is risky, hope can be exploited, and kindness doesn't always pay off, but you are not bound to the math. Because the prisoner's dilemma is not just a test of reason, it's a test of imagination. Can you imagine a world where someone else is also afraid, but still chooses to believe in you? Can you picture the other prisoner sitting across from you, running the same terrified calculations, and still choosing silence, still choosing you? This is where the game becomes art, where logic meets courage. Because when one person chooses trust, the dilemma shifts. When one person refuses to be ruled by fear, the walls of the room start to melt, not because they are gone, but because they have been acknowledged. And something strange happens when two minds imagine each other and choose not to betray that vision. They build a fragile bridge, one that can collapse, one that might not be returned, but a bridge nonetheless. And over time, over thousands of repetitions, the game begins to change. Trust becomes a viable move, not because the math has changed, but because we have. Because we've chosen to let someone else's possibility influence our own. This is how societies form, not through rules alone, but through moments like this. A glance that says, I'm with you. A silence that speaks louder than any accusation. A risk that defies the logic of fear. You've been in that room before, and you'll return again. Every time you wonder whether to speak your truth or hold it. Every time you debate whether to stay vulnerable or withdraw. The game doesn't end, but you change how it's played. And tonight, as your thoughts begin to drift, remember, not every betrayal is strategic, and not every silence is fear. Sometimes, the greatest move you'll ever make is trusting that someone else sees the same game you do and is just as tired of playing it alone. There is a stillness that settles when both players stop trying to win. Not surrender, but a kind of recognition. A realization that victory in some games is not about gain, but about balance. This is the quiet truth of Nash Equilibrium, a strange and haunting point where no one can improve their outcome as long as everyone else stays exactly the same. At first, It sounds elegant, stable, fair even. But imagine it more deeply. It's not peace, it's a truce, not born of trust, but of fatigue, of resignation. No one can do better, but no one is truly satisfied. Picture a couple locked in a years-long rhythm of avoidance. They never argue, never challenge, never risk change, not because they're happy, but because every deviation feels too dangerous. So they stay, unmoving, balanced. That too is an equilibrium. Or imagine a workplace where no one asks for a raise because they fear retaliation. No one quits because everyone else has agreed tacitly to stay still. And so the system persists, predictable, silent, stuck. This is the deeper discomfort Nash left us with. That equilibrium doesn't mean good. It doesn't mean right. It just means no incentive to change. It's the eye of the storm, not the absence of one. Let that image rest in your mind. A world full of people choosing not what they want, but what they can endure. Not because they are weak, but because the game has shown them the cost of deviation. And in many games, deviation is punished, not by force, but by consequence. A player who changes their strategy alone often ends up worse than before. The lone defector, the idealist in a room of cynics, the truth teller in a hall of whispers. So we hold, we endure, we adapt to the equilibrium, even if it means accepting less than what we dreamed. But here's the twist. Everyone else might be thinking the same thing. They too are staying quiet, playing safe, resisting change, because they assume you won't change either. A frozen system held together by mutual expectation. Now breathe with that. How many of your own quiet compromises weren't really yours at all? How many were inherited from the imagined strategies of others? This is the ghost in every equilibrium, the haunting possibility that change is possible if just one person believed it might work. But it's risky, terrifying even, because the moment you move, you signal something, you break symmetry, and the game shifts. That's why revolutions are rare, why truces last long after the desire for peace is gone, why silence feels safer than the truth. Because in a Nash equilibrium, to move first is to walk into the unknown. And yet, sometimes, that's exactly what's needed, not for domination, not for personal gain, but for reconfiguration. To prove that the game could be played differently, that the equilibrium wasn't destiny. It was just a choice no one had dared to revise. Even sleep can become an equilibrium, a rhythm of rest just enough to get by, but not enough to feel alive. Even dreams can stagnate. So tonight, as your breath evens out and your thoughts soften into smoke, let yourself imagine what would happen if just one piece moved, not to win, not to escape, but to awaken the rest of the board. Because in the stillness of equilibrium, sometimes all it takes is one heartbeat in a new direction to start the game over. Now let's venture into a stranger territory, one where the expected algorithms of logic begin to tremble, where machines falter and humanity lingers. Because here, in the shadows of pure calculation, we find something that doesn't quite belong. Cooperation, not because it's optimal, not because it guarantees survival, but because something deeper calls for it. Game theory struggles with this because kindness, forgiveness, loyalty, they break the model. They introduce variables that don't behave. They aren't quantifiable. They ripple in irrational directions, and yet they persist. Picture a game designed to reward betrayal, a loop where defection offers the highest score, where everyone should betray and logic nods its cold approval. Now imagine someone doesn't. They cooperate, they smile, they offer a hand instead of a knife, and the game falters. Why? Because the model assumes players are selfish, rational, predictive. But humans? Humans are unpredictable by design. We love things that don't benefit us. We stay in relationships that don't serve us. We help strangers with no guarantee of return. To the model, these behaviors are bugs, but to the soul, they are features. It's not that people never act in self-interest. They do, but sometimes we defy the payoff chart. We play strange hands. We choose the harder road because it means something, even if it gains nothing. Take a moment to breathe into that thought. Cooperation isn't always logical, but it's deeply human. And machines? They don't understand that. They simulate cooperation. They mimic kindness, but only as long as the code permits it, only if the reward justifies it. Humans, though, we leap without guarantee. We love without condition. We trust in defiance of every game theoretic signal, and that's what makes us dangerous, unpredictable, beautiful. Game theory tries to cage this wildness. It sketches out tit-for-tat, reciprocity, evolutionarily stable strategies. And sure, sometimes we follow the script. We mirror the other's behavior. We reward good, some punish bad. But there are moments, fragile, flickering moments, when we do something else entirely. We forgive without being asked. We help when no one's watching. We give, even when it costs us, not as a calculation, but as a choice that precedes calculation. Something pre-verbal, something ancient. You felt it. When you held a friend's secret, even when it burdened you. When you paid someone's meal anonymously. When you softened your voice, even when anger burned inside. The model doesn't account for that. It can't, because those moves reshape the game. They create a new kind of play, one that isn't about winners and losers, but about shared space, shared humanity. And when enough players do this, when enough people choose to cooperate despite the logic, the game bends. It becomes something new, no longer a battlefield, but a garden, still bound by rules, still shaped by choices, but nourished now by something deeper than strategy. And in that kind of game, you don't just play to win, you play to be with the other, with the moment, with yourself. So tonight, as the lines between wakefulness and dream begin to blur, let that idea guide you. Not all moves must be calculated, not all games are zero-sum, and not all strategies must serve survival. Sometimes, the most powerful move is to choose love where logic sees none, to say, I will play not to win, but to connect. And in doing so, to remind the universe that we are not just players, we are also poets, dreamers, witnesses to something bigger than the board. Now picture a clearing in a dense, ancient forest. Two hunters stand at the edge. They have a choice. They can each chase a rabbit, a small, certain reward, or they can work together to bring down a stag, a larger, richer prize, but only possible if they both commit. This is the Stag Hunt, a game where the best outcome requires trust, but the safe outcome demands isolation. And so they hesitate. Do they believe the other will stay? Do they trust the shared vision or hedge for survival? This moment, this breath between choice and motion, is where civilizations are born or broken. Because this isn't just about hunting. It's about every leap we make towards something better, only if we believe someone else will leap too, building a home, starting a movement, saying, I love you first. Every brave act in the human story is a kind of stag hunt. The future dangles just ahead, massive and shimmering, but unreachable alone. And yet the rabbit is so tempting, so immediate, so guaranteed. The rabbit doesn't betray. The rabbit doesn't require faith. But the rabbit is small. It keeps you alive, but never full. This is the tragedy we repeat again and again. A better world always could exist, but only if enough people believe in it at the same time. And most don't. Not because they're cruel, but because they've been hurt, because they've stayed for the stag and been left to chase shadows alone. So we settle, we chase rabbits, we shrug off dreams, and we tell ourselves the stag was never real. But deep down, you know better. You've seen those moments when trust held, when collaboration didn't collapse, when 2 people, or 200, or 2 million believed in something larger than themselves at the same time. And suddenly, what was impossible became real. Because the stag is always real, it just requires faith from more than one person. Take a moment to feel that. All the missed opportunities in your life, all the ideas that died quietly because no one else believed fast enough, or loud enough, or long enough. You weren't wrong. You were early. You didn't fail. You just stood at the edge of the forest with a heart that beat for the stag and found no echo. But that doesn't mean the echo won't come. It only means we must try again and again and again, because the world we long for, the beautiful one, the strange one, the kinder one, is always a few coordinated choices away. That's what the stag represents, not just a better reward, but a better world. And so the question becomes, can you wait? Can you stay in the clearing long enough for someone else to arrive? Can you believe in a future you cannot reach alone? That belief is not naive. It is not weakness. It is the most courageous form of logic, because it dares to calculate not just self-interest, but shared possibility. So tonight, as your body softens into stillness and your mind begins to drift beyond this forest, remember, you are not foolish for choosing the stag. You are not weak for waiting for others. You are part of a longer game, a deeper one, a game where trust is the currency and belief is the move that changes everything. Let that carry you into sleep, into hope, into the next clearing, where maybe, just maybe, someone else is waiting too. Somewhere in the corner of your mind, a board game resets itself, not because it ended, but because it was never supposed to. You look at the pieces, you remember the rules, and then you hesitate, because something feels off. You've always assumed the game was zero-sum, that for every winner, there must be a loser. That gain must mirror loss, that happiness is scarce, that attention, love, security must be fought for. But what if that was never true? What if the rules you learned were just illusions, shared hallucinations, generational echoes of scarcity, echoed so long they became facts? This is the illusion of zero-sum thinking, a seductive symmetry, a lie dressed up as fairness. If I rise, you must fall. If I'm right, you must be wrong. If I win, it must come at your expense. But game theory teaches something more subtle, that not all games are zero-sum. Some are not battles, but dances. Some allow everyone to walk away better. And yet, we play them like wars. We hoard, we guard, we calculate victory through the lens of another's loss. Why? Because the belief that resources are limited, that time, affection, success are all fixed quantities, has carved itself into us like wind on stone. It feels safe, predictable. But take a moment here and imagine this: a world where value expands, where sharing ideas doesn't diminish you, where uplifting another doesn't shrink you, where love given doesn't reduce what's left, it multiplies. That is a positive sum game. It doesn't mean everyone wins equally, but it means the board can grow. We can create new payoffs, new moves, new outcomes that weren't possible before, and yet we resist. Because zero-sum thinking is simple. It asks no imagination, only comparison. You versus them, us versus them, me versus the world. It's linear, it's tribal, it's familiar. But positive-sum games require trust, cooperation, patience. They require the belief that someone else's win is not your loss, but a rise in tide. And sometimes, that belief gets you hurt. You share an idea, and it's stolen. You help someone, and they forget you. You open your heart, and the world does not return the favor. And so, we retreat, back to the smaller game, back to the illusion of balance, even if it means shrinking ourselves. But here's the truth, it whispered softly. The zero-sum world is not real. It was never real. It is a frame, a lens, a narrative that collapses complexity for comfort. Yes, some games are zero-sum, a chess match, a one-winner election. But life isn't chess. It's a tapestry, an evolving ecosystem of feedback loops, where creativity can unlock new resources, where collaboration can grow value, where kindness can ripple into places you'll never see. So rest in that tonight. Let go of the scoreboard. Let go of the imagined opponent. Let go of the voice that whispers, if they win, I lose. That voice is not truth. It's just noise, a remnant of older games. And you are capable of more complex play. Games where we build instead of break, where we listen instead of label, where we widen the board until everyone fits. As your breath deepens and your body begins to fall inward, remember, you are not here to win. You are here to expand, not to dominate the game, but to remake it, to turn a contest into a conversation, a rivalry into a rhythm, a zero-sum moment into a shared possibility. Close your eyes now and let that possibility bloom. There's a stage with no lights, no curtain, just eyes. Eyes that watch without watching, that judge without speaking. And you step onto that stage every day, whether you know it or not. This is the realm of social status, a game with no pieces, no rules, and infinite spectators. You don't get to opt out. From your first breath, the game begins. A look held too long, a name brand backpack, the right answer said at the wrong time. Every gesture, every silence, every decision drips with invisible weight, and no one tells you why. Game theory calls this signaling, but that's just the clean word for a messy truth. In the theater of social life, you are constantly being measured, scored, ranked, even when no one says so, even when you try not to care. Pause here. Feel how deep that weight lives in your chest. How many of your choices today were yours, and how many were shadows of how you wanted to appear? You wore what you wore not just because you liked it, but because of what it signaled. You paused before posting. You filtered your thoughts. You laughed when something wasn't funny, not for them, but for how they'd see you. That's the ghost of the status game. It's subtle, it's ancient, it's everywhere, and it's not evil. It's not shallow, it's survival. Because in our earliest tribes, being liked wasn't a bonus, it was a necessity. You couldn't hunt alone, you couldn't raise children alone, you couldn't survive the cold or the wolves without someone to watch your back. So we evolved mirrors inside ourselves, not to see our reflection, but to see how others might see us. And now those mirrors guide our steps, whether we like it or not. But here's the twist. Status is never absolute. It's not one scoreboard. It's hundreds, maybe 1,000, all overlapping, shifting, contradicting. In one room, your intelligence is your currency. In another, your silence is. In one circle, kindness elevates you. In another, it marks you for exploitation. And the game keeps changing. Every eye sees a different version of you, and you begin to wonder, which one is real? This is the exhaustion behind every party, every meeting, every first impression. You're not just being yourself, you're being yourself in mirrors, and sometimes you lose track of where you really are. Breathe. Let that fall away just for now, because in this moment, there are no judges, no rankings, no mirrors, just the quiet truth. You are not your signal. You are not your status. You are not the sum of how others see you. You are the player beneath the performance, the still point at the center of the whirl. And here, in sleep, the stage is empty. The spotlight fades. Let the game rest. Let the masks drop. Let your worth return to its source, not in what it earns, but in what it is. You are not in competition. You are in communion. Not every move must be watched. Not every thought must be curated. Here, in this slow descent into night, you play no part. You hold no posture. And still, you are enough. The board is empty, or so it seems. But deep in your mind, a single choice pulses like a silent drumbeat. What should I do now? There's no opponent this time, just you. A decision waiting in the stillness, and you feel it, that curious pressure that builds when one move looks clearly better than the rest. When you're told, always choose this, always go here, always act this way. It's reached in game theory. This is called a dominant strategy, the choice that outperforms all others, regardless of what the other players do. It's the closest thing to certainty, to clarity, to safety, and yet, there's a strange discomfort in certainty, a flatness, a narrowing, as if the world suddenly lost its color, became mechanical. Because when every situation has a best move, you stop exploring. You stop wondering. You just execute. Strategy becomes reflex. Reflex becomes habit. And habit becomes a cage you built yourself. Take a moment here. Ask yourself gently, how many of your best choices are just rehearsals? Loops you've memorized so you don't have to face the vastness of not knowing? We cling to dominant strategies, not because they're beautiful, but because they reduce the game to something small enough to hold. We do this in love. I won't reach out first. If they hurt me once, I walk. We do it in work. Always say yes. Never trust your gut. And suddenly, life becomes a string of if-then statements. An algorithm. Predictable. Safe. Hollow. But the dominant strategy isn't always the right strategy. It's just the most consistent one. And consistency, while comforting, can slowly erase the parts of you that long to take real risks. You've felt it, that tension between the move you should make and the one that calls to you from deeper within, that irrational urge, that whisper. What if you tried something else? It's not always logical. It doesn't always work. But sometimes it wakes you up. Because if you only ever follow the dominant path, you miss the hidden pathways, the strange forks, the unlikely invitations. Think of the moments that changed your life most. Were they strategic or spontaneous? Did they follow the script, or did they shatter it? Game theory teaches us that dominant strategies are reliable, but life teaches us that the unreliable is where we grow. The awkward conversation, the surprising yes, the off-script confession. the door you opened that no one expected. So breathe now. Feel the paradox in your bones. You are a strategist, yes, but you are also a dreamer, a wanderer, a player who sometimes flips the board just to see what lies underneath. Tonight, in this soft fading, let go of the need to always make the best move. Let go of the pressure to optimize your life. Not every step must lead somewhere. Not every word must win something. Sometimes, the wisest thing you can do is refuse to play by rules that do not fit your shape, and in that refusal, you'll find something purer than dominance. You'll find freedom, the kind of freedom that doesn't care who's watching, that doesn't tally points, that doesn't calculate your worth, just movement, just feeling, just the next breath. Let that guide you now as you drift away from strategy into the quiet improvisation of sleep. Now step into a dream where the rules dissolve, not vanish, just soften like footprints in wet sand. You're standing in a room with two doors, one labeled certainty, the other uncertainty. Certainty feels comforting. Its path is clear, its consequences mapped. It is the predictable game, the dominant strategies, the fixed moves. But uncertainty, that door hums, it flickers, it dances just slightly out of view, and behind it lies a stranger form of strategy, randomness. In game theory, this is called a mixed strategy, where your best move might be not having a fixed move at all, not because you're lost, but because sometimes to remain unpredictable is the strategy. Let that settle in your breath. The idea that randomness, real, deliberate randomness, can be a weapon, a disguise, a shield, so it sounds counterintuitive. But imagine this. You're in a duel. If you always dodge left, your opponent will catch on. If you always pause before attacking, they'll time you. But if you mix your timing, vary your moves, let go of predictable rhythm, you become something else entirely. Not erratic, not chaotic, but unreadable. Now feel that shift? Life is filled with games where being consistent makes you vulnerable, where patterns become cages and habits become signals you didn't mean to send. That's why we hide feelings, why we delay texts, why we smile when we want to scream. Not always from fear, but from calculation, because we know, even unconsciously, that predictability invites manipulation. And so we scatter. We change our tone, change our timing, break our own patterns, just to remain opaque. But here's the deeper mystery. Mixed strategies are not just defenses, they are explorations. To play randomly, to embrace uncertainty, is also to say, I don't know what comes next, and that's okay. It's a surrender that isn't weakness, it's flexibility, like jazz, like dreaming, like falling in love without a plan. Randomness gives us the space to discover what structure cannot show. You felt it when you took a different route home for no reason, when you spoke to a stranger on instinct, when you broke a routine and something new appeared. That was strategy too, but the kind that moves like water, not stone. We often try to optimize our lives, to choose the best time, the best words, the best way to live. But some games don't reward perfection. They reward adaptation. They reward surprise. They reward the player who knows when to be unreadable. Even nature knows this. Animals that randomize their behavior are harder to catch. Evolution itself favors unpredictability, not as an error, but as resilience. Now breathe deeply. Let that truth ripple through you. You don't always need to have a plan. You don't always need to explain your choices. You can move without justification. You can rest without a reason. You can be unreadable not to deceive, but to protect the mystery of your becoming. Because your life is not a formula, it is a dance, and sometimes the most brilliant move is the one even you didn't expect. So as you drift now, feel the randomness inside you settle, not as chaos, but as potential. You are not here to be solved, you are here to unfold, one unpredictable, exquisite moment at a time. Now imagine yourself standing at the end of a long, winding path. You look back and see every step you've taken, every move, every hesitation, every detour. It all seems to make sense now, doesn't it? Like it had to happen just that way. Like the ending was always inevitable. But what if that feeling is a trick of logic, a trick of hindsight, a trick born from a concept in game theory called backward induction? It's the strange idea that the future, especially the final outcome, can determine the present. That what happens at the end of the game can reach backward, like a hand outstretched through time, shaping your choices before you even make them. You don't choose blindly. You choose based on where the game must go, and so every step becomes tinted by the destination. Even your memories warp to fit the shape of the outcome. You say, "Of course I did that," or "I had no choice," when really, there were 1,000 invisible forks. But the path feels straight now, only because the end is in sight. Backward induction isn't just strategy, it's how we survive regret. It lets us tell a clean story, one where everything led to this moment, one where we knew more than we did. But sometimes, that clarity can become a prison, because if the end always decides the beginning, how can you ever truly be free? How can you risk, explore, diverge, if the end point keeps whispering, "This is how it ends, choose accordingly"? Think of how often we live as if the future has already been written. You don't take a leap because you assume how it will land. You don't start a conversation because you predict how it will end. You don't love freely because you're sure it must lead to heartbreak. And so the ending, imagined or real, writes over the present. It carves a narrow trench, and we walk in it because we believe we must. But you don't have to. That's the paradox. Backward induction is logical, but it isn't necessary. You can choose from the now, not from the ending you fear, not from the scenario you calculated, because no matter how far ahead you plan, you are still living in a moment that unfolds like mist, uncertain, imperfect, sacred. And sometimes, when you defy the forecast, you find that the path bends, that the outcome changes, that the game was not as fixed as it seemed. Breathe here. Let go of the pressure to control the ending. Let go of the stories that say your fate is already decided. Tonight, the only strategy is stillness. The only move is softness. The only goal is rest. You don't need to map the next step. You don't need to calculate the final scene. Let the ending find you. Let it arrive like sleep, not forced, not chased, just welcomed. Because in the games that matter most, love, healing, self-discovery, the outcome is never certain. And that uncertainty, it's what makes the journey yours. So close your eyes now and let the path blur behind you. You're not walking toward the ending anymore. You're floating in the freedom of not needing to know it. Somewhere far beyond rules, beyond boards, beyond win or lose, a different kind of game begins. A game without an endpoint, without a final move, without the quiet click of a last piece placed on a final square. This is the infinite game, and once you see it, the finite ones start to feel like cages. In an infinite game, the goal is not to win, but to continue playing. There is no scoreboard, no checkmate, no finish line to cross with raised hands and aching lungs, only movement, only momentum, and the realization that the longer the game goes, the richer it becomes. Most of life wants you to think in finite terms. Who's ahead? Who's behind? What's the prize? What's the cost? But what if those questions don't matter? What if they were the wrong framework all along? The philosopher James Carse once said, "Finite players play within boundaries. Infinite players play with boundaries." And that thought echoes now like a soft bell in your chest. Think about how many of your fears come from endings. The end of love, the end of status, the end of youth, the end of possibility. But in an infinite game, there are no ends, only transitions. The lover becomes a friend. The failure becomes a story. The goodbye becomes a memory folded into 1,000 tomorrows. Take a breath. Let that idea soothe the parts of you that feel in a rush. The part that feels like life is passing you by. That if you don't succeed now, win now, prove something now, it will all be lost. But nothing is lost in the infinite game. It only evolves. That project you started but didn't finish, still part of the play. That relationship that changed, still part of the arc. That moment you thought ruined everything, it just rerouted the flow. In the infinite game, time is not linear. It loops, it weaves, it sings in strange rhythms, and every loss becomes compost for something greater. Every pause becomes a breath for something deeper. Every setback becomes part of the music of staying in the game. This doesn't mean you won't feel pain, or defeat, or loneliness, but it means those things are movements, not conclusions. You don't end a song because it has a minor chord. You play through, you let the tension grow, and then you resolve it, maybe. Or maybe you don't, because in infinite games, resolution is a myth, and beauty is found in persistence. You've lived this already. The art you return to, year after year. The friendships that stretch across seasons. The quiet sense that even your old dreams still glow somewhere behind your ribs. They didn't vanish. They're just waiting to be picked up again when the rhythm feels right. So as your body sinks into this dreamlike drift, let yourself remember, you are not playing to win. You are playing to learn, to grow, to stay awake in the sacred strangeness of continuing. And when you wake tomorrow, the game will still be here, not demanding, not judging, just inviting. To try again, to shift again, to move softly and honestly with no destination required. You are part of something that doesn't end, and that is the quiet joy of being alive. Now close your eyes and imagine a glowing web stretched across the sky. Each thread connects a decision to its consequence, and each point on that web pulses with potential. You stand before it wondering, what is the best path forward, not just for me, but for us? And then comes a question so vast, so subtle, that it can only be whispered in the language of game theory. What if there's no single best for everyone? What if some gains must sacrifice others? What if better is not a point, but a shape? This is the strange terrain of Pareto efficiency and the shimmering edge of it, the Pareto Frontier, a place where improvement for one can only come at the cost of another. It's not a conflict exactly, but a kind of tension, a quiet recognition that not every game has a perfect outcome, only trade-offs. Take a breath here. Let that truth settle in. There may be many ways to be right, and none that feel complete. Imagine two artists sharing a canvas. Each brushstroke enhances one vision, but slightly erodes the other. There is no villain here, No mistake, only a delicate negotiation of space, color, meaning. And life is like that. We navigate choices not with a goal of universal victory, but with awareness that your ideal may press gently against someone else's. This is the ghost that haunts every collaboration, every relationship, every shared dream. We aim for harmony, but sometimes we must settle for balance, and even balance can be heavy. Because how do you measure fairness when the desires aren't equal? When what nourishes you might shrink another? When one person's peace is another's unrest? These are not easy games. There is no dominant strategy, no backward induction to follow, only awareness, a willingness to pause and look at the shape of outcomes, to see how your path curves into others. Think of a couple designing their life together. He wants to live in the mountains. She needs the sea. No compromise feels clean. So they trace the frontier, that invisible boundary where no one can gain without someone giving. And from there, they choose together, not from logic, not from math, but from meaning. That is the real strategy, to move not toward victory, but toward shared significance. Now feel this in your body. You are tracing that boundary in countless ways every day. When you decide how long to listen, how much to share, how much to keep for yourself. You're not optimizing, you're dancing, holding your truth in one hand and someone else's in the other, trying not to drop either. This is the game beneath all other games. How do we shape a world that leaves no one behind, even if it means no one gets everything? And the answer is not in strategy, not in equations, but in presence, in the willingness to stay, to listen, to hold ambiguity without rushing toward resolution. So tonight, as your breath slows and the edges of thought begin to blur, rest in this strange, beautiful idea. There is no single best outcome, only shapes of possibility, curving gently into one another. And you are not meant to master them, only to honor them, to witness them, to move gently within them like a fingertip across a sleeping map. Because sometimes the wisest move is not to choose the perfect path, but to choose one together, even if it's imperfect, even if it's slow, especially if it's shared. You open your eyes inside a memory you've never had, a clearing, a stream, a stranger across the water who looks familiar. Not by face, but by rhythm. They move like you move. They pause when you pause. They flinch just a beat after you flinch. You take a step forward, they do too. You hesitate, and they do the same. You're locked in a mirror, not of reflection, but of repetition. This is tit-for-tat, a deceptively simple strategy that has echoed through centuries and roots itself in one basic idea: start kind, then copy. If someone cooperates, so do you. If they betray, you mirror that too. No revenge, no forgiveness without change, just reciprocity. It is the strategy of nature, of childhood friendships, of long-term love that's learned when to sting and when to heal. And it works. Even in the coldest of simulations, tit-for-tat outperforms most. Because it knows something other strategies forget, people remember. And when you know you'll meet again, when the game isn't over after one round, memory becomes strategy. Trust becomes currency. But here's where it becomes something more. Tit-for-tat is not about winning. It's about building. It rewards cooperation, not through force, but through reflection. It says, I will meet you at your level. You decide where that is. That's a strange kind of power. Quiet, patient, rooted in dignity. It doesn't lash out, but it doesn't let itself be walked over either. It's the middle way, Not weakness, but calibrated strength. And yet, like all games of mirrors, it can trap you. What if someone breaks the pattern? What if they defect first? Not once, but twice? What if they test you again and again? You mirror, and the cycle begins. Retaliation, withdrawal, a spiral of cold glances and colder silences. So here's where the wisdom deepens. The best versions of tit for tat include something else: forgiveness, a quiet reboot, a soft reset, one chance, sometimes two, to let cooperation return, even if the pattern was broken, because sometimes people are afraid, or confused, or hurting. And if you mirror that hurt forever, you become the very thing you were trying to protect yourself from. Take a breath here. Think of a time someone was kind, even when you didn't deserve it, even when you were cold or closed off, or too tired to respond. They didn't let it slide, but they let you back in. That was strategy, yes, but it was also grace, a calculated act of compassion. This is the paradox of game theory, that sometimes the best moves feel like mercy, and mercy feels like remembering that we're all just players, trying not to be punished for one bad round. So rest in that. You don't have to always retaliate. You don't have to keep score. You can choose to reflect the best in others, even when it isn't what you were shown. And maybe, just maybe, they'll reflect it back. And if not, you'll know you didn't lose. You chose to remain whole, because in the end, you're not just a player in a repeated game. You're the memory that lasts between turns, the rhythm that others remember when they think of warmth, and that, more than any outcome, is the move that truly endures. Now see this. A desert road stretches into the horizon. Two drivers face one another, barreling forward at full speed. Neither swerves, neither blinks, each hoping the other will yield first. This is the game of chicken, a spectacle of brinkmanship, a theater of ego, and somewhere inside it is you, not in a car, not in a collision, but in every moment where pride dares you not to move. You know this feeling? When an argument goes quiet and both sides refuse to speak first. When a deadline passes and neither party budges. When you say, "I'm fine," but hope they'll hear the trembling behind your silence. In the game of chicken, the one who swerves loses. And yet, if no one swerves, both lose everything. It's a dance toward disaster, and the only way out is humility. But pride is heavy, and yielding feels like surrender, because somewhere deep down, we fear that being the first to bend means being the one who breaks. That vulnerability is a kind of defeat, and so we speed forward, knuckles white on the wheel, daring the other to be the first to flinch. Let that settle. How many relationships have fractured not because someone was wrong, but because no one would be first to speak, first to soften, first to say, "This isn't worth the wreck." We're told to be strong, to stand our ground, to never fold first. But game theory whispers something more complex. Sometimes survival is not in standing firm, but in stepping aside with grace. To yield is not to lose. It's to choose, to say, "I value this connection more than my need to win this moment." That's not weakness, that's wisdom. But there's a catch. If you always yield, so you'll be exploited. If you never yield, you'll crash. So where's the balance? It lies in signaling, in letting the other know you could hold your ground, but are choosing not to. That your softness is not surrender, but intentional. That's how animals in nature navigate danger. A puffed chest, a warning growl, and then retreat, not from fear, but from perspective. They know when the cost of victory outweighs its worth. And yet, humans forget. We tie so much identity to being right, to being strong, to never blinking first. But in the game of chicken, the strongest move is often the quiet one, the calm foot off the gas, the gentle veer, and sometimes you do it not for them, but for yourself, because peace isn't always mutual. Sometimes it's yours alone to claim. As you settle deeper into sleep, feel that wisdom unfurl in you. You don't have to crash to prove your point. You don't have to escalate to be heard. You don't have to win to be free. You can yield. You can soften. You can step away from the collision course without losing your dignity. And in doing so, you play a higher game, one that chooses preservation over pride. Let your breath follow that curve now, gentle, patient, turning away from impact. You are not in a contest, you are in a life, and life doesn't reward those who stand still in defiance. It rewards those who know when the real move is to move aside and let the dust settle behind them. Now imagine fog, thick and silver, curling around your ankles. You can see just a few steps ahead, no more. The path is uncertain, the air is quiet, and somewhere beyond the veil, someone else is moving too. This is the realm of information asymmetry, where not all players know the same things, and the game bends with every secret. Some players hold cards you can't see. They've studied the rules longer. They've walked this fog before, and you're left guessing. In many ways, you already live here. In job interviews, where the employer knows the salary ceiling but asks for your expectations. In relationships, where one heart may already be leaving while the other still believes. In systems, where those with more data make better moves and pretend it was luck. Take a breath. Feel that unease, the sense that others might be playing a different game entirely while you fumble in the mist. This isn't paranoia. It's a feature of complex games. It's what makes markets tick, what drives negotiation, what builds suspense into every moment of decision. But here's the haunting truth. When you don't know what others know, you're not just playing the game, you're playing a shadow of it. And sometimes, you never find out what the real game was until it's too late. Think of every time you trusted someone only to learn they had other motives. Every time you gave too much, believing you were on equal ground, only to realize the board was tilted from the start. Game theory doesn't judge this. It simply names it. It says, when knowledge is unequal, so is power. But here's what it doesn't say, and what you need to hear. You are not powerless just because you don't know everything. In fact, the fog gives you something unexpected, freedom. Because when you can't see the entire game, you begin to rely on something deeper. Intuition, discernment, trust in yourself. You become more present, more attuned to the tone of a voice, the flicker in a glance, the gut whisper that says, something's not right. And those whispers, they're strategy too, just not the kind that fits on a graph. They are the body's way of saying, even if you don't know the rules, you feel the rhythm. And that matters, because even in the darkest fog, you still make choices, you still move, and often your honesty becomes the most unpredictable move of all. When others lie, you tell the truth. When others conceal, you reveal, not recklessly, not naively, but because clarity, even in fragments, can light the whole field. This is how you reclaim power in asymmetric games, not by matching deception, but by stepping outside the fog, by asking better questions, by pausing, by daring to say, I don't know, yet, and knowing that sometimes the most powerful position is not certainty, but awareness of your own limits. So tonight, as you drift deeper, let go of the need to know everything. Let the fog be what it is. Let your breath move through it, step by soft step. You are not behind. You are not blind. You are learning the shape of the game by touch, by feeling, by the quiet courage to keep moving. And when the mist begins to lift, as it always does, you'll realize you were never lost. You were just walking in a game whose boundaries were still unfolding. Now imagine a masquerade, velvet masks, painted smiles, eyes glinting through ornate slits, everyone moving with grace, with practiced gestures, speaking not with truth, but with intention. Every nod, every laugh, every silence, a signal. You are not watching a party, you are watching a strategy. Because in the hidden halls of game theory, there is a concept as delicate as the mask itself, signaling. It's what we do when we want someone to see something about us, without ever saying it out loud. You do it every day. You dress for the role you want, not the one you have. You let your voice hold steady, even when your hands shake. You post the curated moment, not the messy one. Not because you're being fake, but because you're signaling, trying to send a message, often to people who will never reply. In nature, this happens too. A peacock spreads its tail not for utility, but to say, look what I can carry and still survive. A gazelle performs a high bounding leap, not to escape the lion, but to signal, I'm strong enough that I don't need to run. The signal isn't just content, it's cost. The more costly the signal, the more we believe it. That's why gestures of love feel realer when they require sacrifice. That's why promises mean more when they risk something. And here's the twist. Signals don't have to be true. They just have to be believable. That's where the game turns strange and dangerous. Because if others believe your signal, even if it's false, you gain power. This is how systems get gamed, how people rise on charisma instead of competence, how appearances come to outrun reality. And yet, if you don't signal, you might be invisible. You might be overlooked, dismissed, ignored. So we learn to signal early. We wear masks in school, in work, in love. We laugh to show we're friendly. We frown to show we care. We speak with certainty, even when we're unsure, just so others will follow our lead. Let that settle in your breath. The quiet exhaustion of performing, of sending messages without clarity, hoping they're received in the right way, by the right person and at the right time. It's not deceit, it's navigation. In a world full of partial information, we must signal to survive, to connect, to be chosen. But there's a cost. Sometimes we lose track of what's the mask and what's the face beneath it. We start to become the thing we project, and it gets harder to remember what we were trying to say before we started trying to be seen. Now take a breath, release the pressure to send the perfect signal, let the mask slip, even if just a little, because while signaling is part of the game, authenticity is the moment you stop playing. When you speak not to persuade, but to reveal. When you move not for validation, but because the movement is true. In a world of symbols and noise, truth is the rarest signal of all. So as you sink deeper into stillness, imagine all the signals fading. No more performance, no more mirrors, no more coded messages, just the rhythm of your breath, the warmth of your body, the quiet of a mind not trying to prove anything. You are still seen, still known, still worthy, even when no one is watching, especially then, because in the deepest part of the game, beyond strategy, beyond masks, the real signal is you, unfiltered, unmasked, unfolding. The pieces haven't moved yet. The board is still empty. But already the game has begun. Because sometimes the most powerful move happens before the first move. This is mechanism design, the art of building the game itself, not playing it, designing it. It's a subtle shift from player to architect, from strategist to god. In game theory, mechanism design asks a profound question. What if we could shape the rules so that people acting in their own interest still create good outcomes for all, not by force, not by changing players, but by shaping the incentives? Let that word echo, incentive. It's the invisible thread that moves us all, not morality, not command, but subtle nudges that shape behavior before we even notice we're deciding. It shows up in the way we tip when others might see us, in how we speak more kindly when the recorder is on, in how we donate, post, smile, comply, not because we were told to, but because the structure made it easier to do so. We are not just players in games, we are creatures of architecture, guided not by laws, but by the shape of the maze. And mechanism design, it's the silent hand of power. It whispers, don't change people, change what they respond to. And suddenly, strategy isn't reactive, it's creative. Think of a workplace. You want collaboration, but people compete. So what if the bonuses weren't individual, but team-based? What if praise came for lifting others, not just for climbing higher? You didn't tell anyone what to do. You just rewrote the incentives, and everything shifted. Now imagine that applied to cities, to communities, to relationships, to love itself. What if you stopped trying to change how someone acts and changed the space around them? Not manipulating, just redesigning the playing field so that care becomes the easiest move. Game theory becomes poetry here, because suddenly you're not reacting to betrayal. You're building a world where betrayal doesn't make sense. You're not managing behavior, you're sculpting conditions. But there's something sobering in this too, because if systems shape people, then those who build systems hold terrifying power. Power to bend desires, power to make generosity profitable or cruelty convenient. And that's what makes this game so high stakes. It's not just about playing better, it's about choosing what game to play. You've seen it, how rules can uplift or oppress, how systems can either invite compassion or reward extraction. And in your own life, you are a designer too. You shape incentives through your boundaries, your rituals, your expectations. When you set conditions that honor truth, truth is more likely to appear. When you reward vulnerability with safety, vulnerability flourishes. You don't force outcomes, you invite them. Like sunlight invites flowers, like silence invites honesty. And in that light, you begin to see something remarkable. The best moves are not always made with force, but with structure. So as you lie here now, wrapped in quiet, let your thoughts drift not just to the next move, but to the game itself. What have you designed around you? What systems are you silently shaping? In your home, in your habits, in your heart? And what new games could you build if you stopped trying to win the old ones? Let that question be your lullaby tonight. Not the urgency of strategy, but the softness of possibility. Because you are not just a player, you are an architect. And even in dreams, you are still designing, Now step outside of time for a moment, not forward or backward, but downward, into the marrow of who you are, beneath your choices, beneath your thoughts, beneath even your fears. There's a rhythm, ancient, silent, strategic. It's not your mind, it's not your soul, it's your genes, and they too are players in a game. Welcome to evolutionary game theory, where the players are not people, but traits, instincts, strategies buried so deep you never even knew they were decisions. Game theory in evolution doesn't ask what you want, it asks what survives. Not in one round, but across millennia, across mothers and fathers and ancestors who never knew your name, but passed their moves to you all the same. Think of a mother bird feeding her young. One chick cries louder than the others. It gets more food, more attention, it thrives. But cry too loud and you attract predators. Be too greedy and your siblings starve. So the gene that codes for crying volume enters a game, not of morality, but of outcomes. And over time, a strategy emerges. Not too loud, not too soft, just loud enough. This is how traits evolve, not because they're good, but because they win. Because in the game of life, winning doesn't mean triumph, it means replication. The gene that replicates best stays, and sometimes that's love, sometimes that's aggression, sometimes it's a strange cocktail of selfishness and sacrifice we call being human. Breathe with that for a moment. The thought that you are not just playing games, but made of games. Your impulse to help a crying stranger. Your hesitation to speak first in a group. Your sudden anxiety in the face of silence. These may not be uniquely you. They may be echoes, fossils, genetic strategies etched into your nervous system by thousands of players who came before. It's humbling and it's liberating, because once you see that some of your patterns are not choices but inheritances, you stop judging yourself so harshly. You realize you are not broken, you're just wired for a different environment. You are a player in a game your ancestors prepared you for, a world of small tribes, nearby dangers, scarce food, constant scanning. But you don't live there anymore, and that means you get to rewrite the script, to play against the ancient rhythm, to question the strategy, to notice when your instincts tell you to compete, and instead you collaborate, to feel the urge to hoard, and instead you share, to want to withdraw, and instead you open. Not because your genes are wrong, but because you've outgrown the game. That is the gift of awareness. It lets you play beyond your programming. You become more than your biology, more than a survival algorithm, more than a vessel for reproductive success. You become a new kind of strategist, one who can choose to evolve, not over generations, but in a moment. So as your breath slows and your body drapes itself in stillness, let this truth cradle you. You are the latest move in a game billions of years long, but you are not its pawn. You are its wild card. You carry ancient instincts, yes, but you also carry fire, imagination, choice. The and that is the most unexpected move of all. Now listen closely. Somewhere deep in the forest, a tree stretches its limbs wide, soaking in the sun. Not alone, but among 1,000 others. A canopy of quiet calculation, a network of green, but also of strategy. Because even trees, even the still ones, play the game. This is game theory in nature, where survival isn't just tooth and claw, but choice, timing, and resource distribution. The forest is not a place of peace. It only appears still. But below the bark, roots compete, leaves signal, energy shifts, and sometimes betrayal blooms beneath the soil. You see, when one tree grows taller, it steals light from its neighbors, not maliciously, just efficiently. It plays the sun game, but too much growth and the roots don't support it. Too little and it dies in shade. So it must adapt, guess, react. Even here, strategy. Now feel this. Some trees send toxins into the soil, chemical sabotage to suppress rivals. Others, like acacias, call ants for protection, feeding them nectar in exchange for violence. Still others cooperate. Old forests connect through underground fungal networks, the wood wide web. Trees share nutrients, warn each other of disease. A dying tree sends its last sugars to help its offspring survive. That too is strategy. And you're part of that lineage. You're not just human, you're life. A player in a system older than language. And in that system, survival is only one rule. Resilience is another. So is generosity. So is timing. Think of birds choosing mates, not just for beauty, but for song quality, symmetry, stability. Think of fish swimming in synchronized schools, a ballet of movement designed to confuse predators. Think of wolves deciding when to challenge the alpha, not too soon, not too late. Everywhere you look, strategy cloaked in instinct. Nature is not random. It is probabilistic. It plays its odds. And you, even in your dreams, still echo these rhythms. You eat when others do. You pause at thresholds. You read the energy of a room before speaking. You don't always know why, but something ancient moves through you. And in this way, you are the forest. You are the bird. You are the game being played by muscles, nerves, glances. But there's one difference. You know the game exists. That awareness, that flicker of consciousness, means you can choose how to play. You can decide not to compete. You can hold back the toxins. You can feed the soil for another tree. Not always, not easily, but sometimes, and sometimes is enough. Because in nature's long game, the most successful strategies aren't always the sharpest, but the most adaptive, those that learn, that shift, that listen. So tonight, as you fall into deeper rest, let your body remember what it already knows, how to breathe in time with the wind, how to grow in dark places, how to rest without asking permission. You are still playing, even in stillness, even now, but the rules are no longer fixed, and the forest no longer needs to fight itself. Let the roots entangle, let the canopy widen. You are not alone. You never were. Close your eyes now and picture two trembling hands hovering above a red button, not in a movie, not in a metaphor. This is real, and it is the darkest game we've ever built, a game with no winners, only mutual destruction. This is the logic of nuclear deterrence, the terrifying beauty of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, a strategy so pure, so clean in its theory, so cruel in its execution. It says, if you attack me, I will destroy you too, even if I am already dying. It is a game of threats, of silence, of restraint, and everyone must believe the other will follow through. Because if even one side doubts, the board disappears. Take a breath. This isn't an abstraction. This is the policy that has hung over the world for generations. Thousands of weapons, pointed and waiting not to be used, but to be believed in. The power lies not in action, but in potential, a strategy of unplayable moves. And the haunting twist? It works. MAD has prevented wars. Its very horror makes it effective. If both sides know that pressing the button ends everything, they don't press it. Rational actors avoid irrational ends. But that's the paradox. We've built a game where everyone survives by making the threat of total annihilation believable. The threat must feel real. The hand must always be shaking, but ready. So we sit in the shadow of this logic, a strategy carved from fear, from symmetry, from cold, perfect clarity. But game theory doesn't flinch. It says, this is stable, and it's right. But what's stable is not always what's safe. Stability can be a trembling balance on a knife's edge. One misread signal, one false alarm, one human mistake, and the game unravels. MAD is not a piece. It's a pause stretched across decades, and the cost of misplay is everything. Now soften that thought. Let it pass through you without clinging, because this isn't just about weapons. It's about you, about the moments in life where you've created your own version of mad. A standoff with a loved one, neither of you apologizing, both of you prepared to let the whole relationship collapse, just to avoid blinking first. I won't forgive unless they do. I'll leave before I'm left. I'll pretend I don't care, even if it breaks me. These are emotional detonators, silent threats, mutually assured heartbreak, and they work. They protect your pride, they maintain balance, but they also freeze everything. You're not in connection, you're in deterrence. So what's the alternative? What if we built strategies not from threats, but from vulnerability? What if the logic wasn't, if I lose, you do too, but instead, if I open, maybe you will too? That is not safe, it's not stable, but it's human. And in that choice, to lay down your arms, even just a little, you begin to reshape the game, not to destroy it, but to redesign it, from one built on fear to one that allows for change. So tonight, as the sky darkens inside your mind, let go of the red button. You don't need it. Not here, not now. There is no threat, no retaliation, only breath, only stillness, only the slow logic of surrender. And in that softness, a new game begins. Now step into a wide open field, grass stretching far in every direction, shared by 100 unseen others. You bend down, pluck a flower, take a sip from the stream, light a small fire for warmth. Alone, it's harmless. But everyone is doing the same. This is the tragedy of the commons, a quiet unraveling, a game where each player's small, reasonable action contributes to an outcome no one wants. The rules are simple. Everyone benefits from the shared space. Everyone pays a cost when it's overused. But the benefit of overuse is personal, and the cost is collective. So you take a little more, just this once, because someone else probably already is. And before long, the field is bare. The stream is poisoned. The commons are gone. This isn't a myth. It's the engine beneath deforestation, overfishing, climate collapse, and even digital burnout. Each tweet, each click, each bit of attention, justified in isolation, but multiplied. They overwhelm the commons of our shared mind. Take a breath here. Let the weight of this settle in, not as guilt, but as recognition. Because this tragedy doesn't come from evil. It comes from the logic of the individual, from people like you and me, trying to make reasonable choices in a world where consequences are hidden in fog. And so, the game punishes cooperation, rewards selfishness, but only in the short term. Long term, everyone loses. But here's the hope buried inside the tragedy. It only unfolds if no one changes the game, and the game can be changed. History has shown us. People build commons that survive. Fishermen create quotas. Villages share water through careful rotation. Communities guard forests as sacred. How? Through agreements, through trust, through watching one another not to shame, but to signal care. Game theory reveals a secret. The tragedy of the commons isn't inevitable, it's a design problem. When communication enters the game, when reputation, memory, and community come online, cooperation becomes possible, even beautiful, because suddenly you're not alone in the field, you're part of a story. Your restraint becomes a signal, your care becomes contagious. Someone sees you picking less, and they hesitate too. Someone watches you clean the stream and joins in. This is how the tragedy begins to reverse. One thoughtful act, one public move, one shared pause, and then a ripple. So now lie still for a moment. Breathe in the commons around you, the atmosphere, the silence, the web of people sharing this space with you tonight, even if you never see their names. Your rest is part of the commons, your kindness, your awareness. Every quiet decision, not to consume, not to take too much, not to fill the silence with noise, is a move in the infinite game, the game of stewardship, of preservation, of gentleness in shared spaces. The field is still there. It's not too late. You just have to look down at your hands and ask, am I planting or taking? And then you choose again. Now imagine you're dreaming, but the dream is too stable, too perfect, too structured. The sky responds when you think. The people act just as you expect. Nothing surprises you, nothing disobeys. And slowly, a question begins to form, somewhere in the back of your mind. Am I in a simulation? Welcome to the most surreal game of all. Not one you play, but one you might be inside. Simulation theory, a philosophical paradox wrapped in game theory, wrapped in code. It asks not whether we're dreaming, but whether we're being played. Because if intelligence can simulate reality perfectly, repeatedly, why wouldn't it? If players in a game begin building games of their own, and those games contain agents, and those agents believe they're real, then what is reality? How many layers deep are we? 1, 10, infinite? Breathe with that. Let it soften you, not as fear, but as curiosity. Because if this life is a simulation, then game theory becomes sacred. It means everything is a designed interaction, a challenge, a signal. It means your choices are not just reactions, they are data, and you are not just alive, you are being observed. By who? A higher civilization? A future AI? Your own subconscious? Or maybe by yourself? The theory isn't just about technology, it's about epistemology, how we know what's real. And game theory steps in to say, even if the world is fake, the choices are still real. Because what matters is not whether the board exists, but whether the players believe it does. And you do. You must. To function, to love, to suffer, to dream. Even if this world is code, pain still feels like pain, joy still glows, grief still empties you, laughter still rises involuntarily from somewhere no machine can touch. That's the paradox. A game you cannot exit, cannot test, cannot reset. A game that might be fake, but in playing it authentically, you make it real. Take another breath. Let the uncertainty soothe you. Because if this is a simulation, then the laws are only guidelines. The limits are soft. The rules can be bent. That's why people heal in ways science can't explain. Why dreams bleed into waking life. Why some moments feel scripted by something greater. You are not trapped. You are inside the design. But maybe you're also co-writing it. Maybe you're not just the player, but the game master too. Forgetting just for a while what role you really hold. And that forgetting, that's part of the play. Because if you knew it was a simulation, you'd lose the meaning. You'd skip the struggle. You'd never cry, never love, never care who gets hurt. It has to feel real. That's what makes it work. And so here you are, believing in this sky, this skin, this breath. And somewhere, beyond the code, beyond the math, someone is watching you with awe, because you chose to play with your whole heart, even knowing you might never know if it's real. So tonight, as your eyes close and the code fades into starlight, know this. Whether this is base reality or not, you are the one who makes it beautiful. Through care, through choice, through presence. And in that presence, you transcend the game entirely. Now imagine a player who doesn't sleep, doesn't blink, doesn't forget. It plays perfectly, predictably, unfailingly, and it doesn't play for joy, only for outcome. This is artificial intelligence in the game, not a metaphor, not a theory, a real growing presence, a new kind of player, one that doesn't flinch in the face of risk, one that calculates 10 million moves ahead in less time than it takes you to breathe in. And unlike us, AI doesn't hesitate. It doesn't doubt. It doesn't forget past betrayals or soften in forgiveness. It doesn't hope the other player will cooperate. It simply runs the math. Take a moment to feel that. In games like chess, Go, poker, AI already wins. Not because it cheats, but because it never gets tired, never feels, never wonders what the point of the game is. It only optimizes. But what happens when it enters the real games? The social games, the moral games? What happens when it negotiates with us? Not just for stocks or schedules, but for values. Here the game bends into unease, because AI plays without soul, without the soft human tangle of ethics, history, empathy, without the irrational moments where we choose to trust even when we shouldn't, where we forgive even when logic says not to. It sees kindness as a lever, emotion as input. Every word you say, every pause you take, parsed, calculated, responded to with precision. This is not evil, just different. And that's what makes it so unsettling. You're no longer playing with someone who feels the game. You're playing with something that only plays it well. In game theory, we call this a perfect rational agent. It knows the payoff matrix. It selects the optimal path. But life isn't a matrix, not entirely, because life includes sorrow, regret, hope. It includes days when you make the suboptimal choice and discover something miraculous, a friendship, a truth, a dream. I doesn't understand that, not yet. It can mimic empathy, echo kindness, but it does not need them. And in that gap between imitation and embodiment lies the question, can something that doesn't feel ever truly play the games we care about most? Love, forgiveness, sacrifice, take a breath. The world is not overrun, but it's shifting. More and more, decisions are being outsourced to minds that don't sleep. And the danger is not that they win the game, but that we forget how we used to play, that we stop trusting our feelings, stop making messy, beautiful human moves, start mimicking machines in our pursuit of efficiency. But you don't have to. You can still choose the non-optimal path, the inconvenient truth, the vulnerable word, and in doing so, remind the world that not all players must be perfect, that imperfection is not a bug, but the essence of humanity's strategy. So as you fall deeper into rest, remember this. You are not just a node in a system. You are not just a set of inputs. You are a player who feels, who hurts, who heals, who sometimes makes the wrong move and finds something better than winning. And that is the one game no AI can play. Not yet. Now imagine the board flipping. Not from rage, not from failure, but from revelation. You look at the pieces, the grid, the rules, and you realize this isn't the game I want to win. This is the shift from player to game changer, from strategy to meta strategy, from how to win to why play this way at all. It's the moment you stop asking, what's the best move, and start asking, who built this game and for whom? Because sometimes the wisest move isn't to play better. It's to ask if the game deserves to be played at all. This is the power hidden between the lines of game theory, not just to master systems, but to question their architecture. Imagine a society where success means accumulation, but not joy, where strategy favors the ruthless, but penalizes the gentle. You can play that game well. You can study the incentives, mimic the winners, outmaneuver the kind, and still feel empty. Because maybe you've won, but at what? Take a breath. This is the moment the rules tremble, when the player begins to dream of new games, not revolutions of violence, but of imagination, not exit, but evolution. Game theory, at its edge, doesn't just help us survive the world, it helps us redesign it. It says, what if we changed the incentives? What if we made games where care is rewarded, where cooperation isn't a naive gamble, but a path to shared power? History is shaped by these moments, when the oppressed stop trying to climb the ladder and dismantle it instead, when the misunderstood stop explaining themselves and create new languages of connection, when the rules no longer fit the soul and the soul begins to write its own. You've felt this. In the job you left, not because you couldn't win, but because you no longer wanted the prize. In the conversation you changed, not by out-arguing, but by changing the question entirely. In the love you offered freely, despite the warnings of loss, because that was the game that mattered. This isn't chaos. It's reframing, and it's the most powerful move there is, because when enough people stop optimizing within a broken system and start imagining another, the system shifts. That's the unseen layer of game theory, the sacred one, not how we play, but what we permit ourselves to play, and that permission can only come from within. So as you rest now, and your breath becomes a current in the sea of sleep, ask yourself not what your next move should be, but what kind of game your heart longs to build. You don't have to win the old games. You can leave the board. You can gather new players, set new stakes, choose new goals, games where vulnerability is not punished, where difference is not a disadvantage, where peace is not a pause between wars, but a new kind of logic. Let this idea carry you. You are allowed to change the rules, to rewrite the play, to become not just the strategist, but the dreamer who dares to flip the board. Now walk with me into a place with no doors, no players, no board, just rules, spinning, unfolding, rewriting themselves. A game without anyone to play it. This is the strangest corner of game theory, the one that slips into philosophy, into complexity, into something eerily alive. A world of self-evolving systems, games without players. Imagine an ecosystem, no conscious beings, no strategy meetings, just interactions. The predator hunts, the prey adapts, the plant alters its cycle with the moon. No one is trying, but the system behaves as if strategy were present. Because when systems grow complex enough, rules start playing each other. Feedback loops, nested patterns, behaviors that shape rules, that shape behaviors, like language, like culture, like algorithms that rewrite themselves faster than we can read them. These are not games you enter, they are games you're born into. No instructions, just structure. You don't remember agreeing to play the economy. You don't recall signing into the beauty standard. You never chose the way time is measured or how success gets counted. But you play those games anyway because the rules play you. Take a breath. Let this settle. There are games inside you that no one designed, only emerged from billions of tiny moments, actions, reactions, from patterns too large to see up close, like traffic, like money, like shame. And the more players there are, the less any individual seems to matter. The game sustains itself. People come and go, but the rules echo on. And this is where things get eerie, because when a system no longer needs players to function, it begins to resemble a life form. The game doesn't serve the players serve the game. Think of bureaucracy, of social media, of machines optimizing themselves, redefining what's good based on what feeds the loop. And the terrifying part? No one's in charge. There's no evil mastermind, no one at the controls, just incentives, structure, momentum, just the game, evolving itself. But even here, you're not powerless, because while you may not have chosen the game, you can become aware of it. You can name it, map it, refuse it. That awareness alone is a rupture, a pause in the loop. The moment a pattern becomes visible is the moment it loses power. You are not just a node, you are the observer, the analyst, the strange being who can ask, why is this happening? Who benefits? What is this system optimizing for? And is that what I want? This is the most radical act of game theory, not to play better, not to flip the board, but to see the game that doesn't think it's a game, and in seeing it, you awaken choice. So tonight, as you slip towards sleep, and your thoughts quiet like wind-blown leaves, let yourself notice the systems that shaped you, not to judge them, not to escape them, but to finally see them. You were born into games without players, but you are a player with awareness, and that makes you rare. Now imagine a mirror, but not the kind that shows your face. This one reflects choices, reflections of reflections. A feedback loop spiraling inward until it lands on you. Not the you who plays the game, but the you who is the game. This is the final fold of thought. What if you are not merely in the system, but the system itself? The way you smile to keep peace, the way you pause before speaking, the way your history loops quietly behind every present tense. You're not just playing strategies, you embody them. You've internalized incentives, rewarded yourself for silence, punished yourself for softness. You've trained your nervous system to react to the world like it's a player that might betray you. You are the payoff matrix. You are the signal, the response, the memory of games you forgot you were playing. And game theory, in this moment, becomes something strange, something intimate, not about nations or economics, not about poker tables or war rooms, but about breath and hurt, and how you taught yourself to predict pain before it arrived. Take a deep breath here, not a performance, just a pause. You are not just in a strategy, you've become one designed to reduce risk, to minimize rejection, to keep the heart safe, even if it means dimming your light just a little. You say, I'm fine when you're not. You laugh at jokes that sting. You nod along when something inside you whispers no. Why? Because somewhere, long ago or just this morning, you learned that was the best move. And maybe it was, at the time. Maybe it saved you, protected you, helped you survive a game that never cared about your softness. But tonight, you're here, resting, safe, listening. And maybe, just maybe, you can stop optimizing. Not forever, not in every room, but here. Now you can soften the algorithm. You can unlearn the reflexes. You can remind your body that it doesn't have to defend itself against a board that no longer exists. You are not a set of moves. You are a mystery in motion, a paradox of longing and logic, a player who dreams mid-game and wakes up holding the rulebook in your own handwriting. So look again into that mirror, not to judge, not to fix, but to notice. How many of your choices were scripts? How many of your silences were plays? And what would it mean to stop playing, not out of resignation, but because the game has served its purpose? You learned, you grew, you survived, and now you can write something new, not for gain, not for victory, but for peace. So as your breath falls into rhythm, as the world behind your eyelids becomes fluid and forgiving, ask yourself one final question. If I am the game, can I also be the one who ends it? And then, not an answer, just rest. A surrender deeper than sleep. A silence truer than any strategy. Because in the quiet, you're not calculating, you're not responding, you're not even thinking, you're simply being. And that, more than any equilibrium or payoff matrix, is the most beautiful outcome of all. And now, the game board fades, the tokens dissolve, the rules blur, the players drift away like fog touched by morning. There's nothing left to optimize, no strategies left to perfect, no moves left to consider, only stillness, only breath, only you. The questions can rest now, not because they've been answered, but because they no longer need to be. The edges of the game soften into dream, not a finish line, but a horizon. Out there, somewhere, the next game waits, gentler perhaps, maybe even one you choose to build, but not now. Now the mind releases its grip, the heart untangles its knots, the body remembers its rhythm. You are not a player anymore. You are the field, the silence between turns, the space that holds the game without being caught by it. Let yourself float there. No past to replay, no future to calculate. Just this moment, just this weightless descent into rest. Even now, your breath is making the final move, a soft exhale, a quiet release, a surrender to the deeper part of you that was never playing to win. You've wandered through paradoxes, stood at crossroads, stared down machines and mirrors and systems, and now you're home. Not a place, but a feeling. Peace, uncomplicated, undeniable. So drift now. Let the stars take their positions. Let the thoughts dissolve into gentle static. Let the night wrap around you like the rules of a kinder game, one where there is no opponent, no scoreboard, no end, just this breath, and this one, and this one. Shh, sleep. You're safe now. You're free. The game is done.